Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hi aki ana te atukura, he hio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei, mauri ora. Let us affirm today that we as councillors will work together to serve the citizens of Salon District, to always use our gifts of understanding, courage, common sense, wisdom and integrity in all our discussions, dealings and decisions so that we may solve problems effectively. May we always recognise each other's values and opinions, be fair-minded and ready to listen to each other's point of view. In our dealings with each other, let us always be open to the truth of others and ready to seek agreement, slow to take offence and always prepared to forgive. May we always work to enhance the well-being of Salon District and its communities. Farewell. If I could ask you to remain standing, and on the wall on the side of the building here, we've just put up over lunchtime with Councillor Shane Bihar, the Treaty of Waitangi, next door to the Queen, just as a founding document for this nation. So feel free to have a wee walk past. It's a copy of the original as signed, travelled around signed on Waitangi Day 1940 by the people who were there, and then travelled around, sorry, 18, and then travelled around the country and was signed by over 500 chiefs around the place. So yeah, a really important thing for us to acknowledge and have, and I thought it would be nice to be able to sing the Council Waiata as a part of that now being laid on the wall. Ko wai makareri ki te raki e, ko ora kaya ki te tuku e, te wai hora e hora ake nei, kina te oranga ona iwi e, ma waira e torima e, maho mahaku matato e. Good. So first item on the agenda is confirmation of minutes from the earlier meeting of the council. Someone want to confirm those? Moved Councillor Alexander and seconded Councillor Bihar. Any comments on those minutes? All those in favour say aye. Against, declare it carried. Next we have the confirmation of the minutes from the 17th of March, extraordinary meeting of council. Mover and seconder, those be, thank you, McInnes and Mugford. Any discussion on those minutes? Before we vote, just to say that this is the document that will be sent to every household in Selwyn. So it starts off this way on the front, and there's a big fold out which talks about the geography of Selwyn and where a number of our projects are happening, and asking for feedback on each of the major projects as identified. And then on the back there's the chance to look at how things are going to look like as a ratepayer and what it means for different property categories. There's a number of them in the room for you today that Stephen has. If you'd like to take some with you when you go, please help yourself at the front of the table. So all those in favour that those minutes be recorded as true and accurate, say aye. Against, declare it carried. Next report is the Chief Executive's report, and I'll hand over to David.
Mr Mayor, councillors, thank you. Good afternoon. So really want to talk more about the first item, which is the Zone 5 and 6, which the Mayor, Councillor Mugford and myself had the opportunity to attend a few days back. Probably for me, the highlight would have been the first couple of hours of the first morning, where each council took the opportunity, 5 minutes, to talk about current issues that are facing them in their district, naturally focusing on rating increases. And I'd have to say that our proposed rating increase of 4.9% is very conservative compared with most of the other councils in the South Island at the moment. There will be some notes coming around from the meeting which we'll share with you further down the track. The President of Local Government New Zealand started off his presentation on Monday morning talking about Three Waters, gave some feedback with where we are in the program, talked about relationship strengthening with Solgum, commented that LGNZ do currently have genuine access to central government and they see that as a major strength at the moment. and also the LGNZ organisation is reviewing its structure to meet future member expectations. Made reference to the Prime Minister's call for a conversation on housing and how local government may be able to assist in that space. The CE of local government acknowledged that they need to put a bit more effort into future engagement, and particularly centralised engagement on Three Waters. Talked about RMA reform, and the observation was made that if we thought Three Waters was huge, RMA is an absolute monster that's coming ahead of us. But it needs to be based on principles that keep communities at the centre of decision making. And I think when we enter into these discussions, that's one of those things that we need to focus on. Just think about some of the plan change discussions that we've got at the moment. We did a couple of field trips, which were very interesting, and we finished off with conversation on Three Waters, where the mayors or representatives of each council were asked to come up and within 1 minute articulate where their councils were most observed that time frame. But there were common themes that came through, and those of you who were exposed to the session yesterday would align with these, and that is firstly that we are looking for more answers, more information to assist best decisions for the benefit of our communities. Also, a lot of comments about the impact of rural water supplies and stock water. But all in all, a really good informative session, and it's around relationship building. But the key takeaway is that we're in for a huge year this year in terms of responsiveness to initiatives coming out of Wellington. Do we have the resources and the available time to be able to respond? And also mindful of the fact that our communities are starting to get into consultation overload a wee bit as well.
On that, and around the zone meeting, and Bob, you may have anything you'd like to share as well. There are 3 key presentations that included field trips, and some of it was interesting for its newness, and some of it was interesting just to reinforce where we've been at for Salon. And so one was around why Wanaka, and the good work that they're doing as catchment to understand water improvement around the Wanaka space, and understanding ground and dirt conditions, biodiversity, as well as water quality, and really reminiscent of the work that we've been doing here since the Canterbury Water Management Strategy has been in place, and the good work of our zone committees over that time. So it was a little bit of a Back to the Future 2011 trip for us to see. It's good to see others in the country are now focused on water in a serious way, the same way Canterbury has for a while. The second was around development in the town of Wanaka, and some new development that's taken place. That's in a Mitre 10, a New World, a BP so far, but plans for residential and other tourist activities to take place there. Sort of the master planning approach to the town and growth of Wanaka, and what having extra growth means to an existing town centre, and how that's managed. And again, thinking back to the changes we made since the early 2000s about strategic planning for our district, and trying to make sure that we get good outcomes and that development happens in spaces that we would anticipate. But the one that was new for almost everyone in the room was Queenstown's approach to housing, and inclusionary zoning was how they addressed it to us. The changes that enabled them to have, when land was rezoned, that the value uplift in that rezoning was not just captured by the landowner who had the uplift, but was also supported with some other outcomes for the community. And for them down there, it was focused on their own social housing trust, which had different mechanisms to help people at different stages of life and of need into homes. And some of the contributions, well, they range from about 2 to 12% of a contribution back to the community by using inclusionary zoning. The question was asked around the room, who else uses this as part of the mechanism within the district plan, and no hands went up. So Queenstown is doing that alone at the moment in the South Island, and I guess it triggered in me some thoughts about our own district plan and things that we have considered and things that we haven't considered that are current conversations for people around the place. So it'll be interesting once we see the feedback from our community on their initial submissions to the district plan and where they sit, the types of types of items that they bring up, but a care for housing in a way that, value uplift and rezoning land was shared was certainly a part of a big part of the presentation down there. I guess for us in our district plan, we haven't got about rezoning large amounts of land. There's some small little pockets, so the zoning discussion wasn't a major for us through the district plan review. Bob, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add.
I think you've covered all, Sam, but the housing was the one that really interested me, and the different ways of looking at things in the future and ways that we could get some cheaper housing. With they have a trust which the council work with, and the developers and the trust have houses which they rent to buy or lease. So I think it's probably something we could look at in the future.
Is there some information you got that you could circulate around to us so we could look at it ourselves?
We didn't receive any specific information there. It was part of the discussion. We've asked for that to be circulated because there are a number of councils that were interested.
And I think when we circulate the minutes, there's going to be some PowerPoint slides attached to those as well. Second item on my report is around the remit process. So the CE of Local Government New Zealand reminded everybody that last year, I think it was 20 or 20 plus remits discussed at AGM. A, this is an imposing number. B, also in terms of success rate in delivering those. So the message was pretty clear. Only put forward a remit this year if you think it's essential. And that's largely being mindful of the workload that is in front of us, certainly during this calendar year. I'm not suggesting or thinking of any remit that we might possibly put forward this year. Mr Mayor?
Yes, certainly support that, and myself and Gary Kirch, the Mayor of Waitaki, who's the Zone 6 representative on National Council, actively asked at the Zone 5 and 6 meeting for councils not to enter into this process, that there's better ways of getting an outcome when you start to involve yourself in the strategy of the board, rather than a vote at an AGM around things that either matter or don't to different areas of the country, rather than being strategically important for local government New Zealand. So I haven't heard any discussion from any councillors here of matters you'd like raised in this way. I'd encourage us to think about if you do have something, whether there's other ways that we raise those.
Item number 3, and I'm going to just read an extract for the benefit of those who are live streaming. The subject is the Salon Business Opinion Survey, which we recently completed. We surveyed 120 businesses from 17 different industries across our district, and shows confidence after the year that we've had behind us with the COVID epidemic. The results showed 28% of businesses are expecting their profits to increase over the next 6 months, and 9% are expecting to hire new staff. So really strong message, and those results were shared. We had a recent business breakfast on the 23rd of February, really well attended. They're a really good source of contacts and information in terms of what people think are important for our district going forward. There is another business breakfast scheduled in a couple of months, and my advice to elected members is, if you have the opportunity to attend, please make sure that you do that. Put some information in on accessibility with respect to Te Atia. Local members survey results, interesting to read. The observations were pleasingly interesting. A number of elected members who said the experience of being an elected member met their expectations has risen from 61% in 2006 to 74%. Obviously still comments about frustrations and those issues that we still are confronted with as a sector. Funding and affordability will always be foremost, but I think capacity and capability across the sector to be able to deliver, particularly in some of those technical areas where we do have competing interests from central government and also from the private sector. And item number 6, Mr Mayor, just some proposed changes from the management team with respect to the delegations manual. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. There's another item that's not in David's report due to it only occurring yesterday, and that's around the Three Waters discussion and where we're at. So thank you to all the councillors that attended yesterday. Some of the information that we received we knew, some of it was just not quite at the level that we needed to be able to make a future decision, but it was good to sit in a room with the rest of mayors and councillors and staff from around the South Island and get a feel for the mood of how people are working towards or not feeling like they want to work towards this matter around Three Waters reform driven by government and without universal buy-in, let's say that at the moment. The challenges as presented yesterday were that there's a $50 to $90 billion deficit across the country to get existing water and wastewater operations up to today's standards. So there's a big hole just to meet today's things. There's a total investment on top of that, maintenance and renewal for the next 30 to 40 years of another $100 billion. And so the size of what the government has seen as the whole is a large one. So they're proposing, as we know, multi-regional scaled entities. Yesterday they didn't tell us the ultimate size or boundary of those, but did talk through more than one was better than one. So they didn't want one for the nation. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 were kind of the space that they were presenting on, and their maps showed those sorts of options. They want to see continued public ownership. They want to see balance sheet separation for those three water assets away from councils. So it's to move it off the council's balance sheet. They want to see asset owning model. So again, it won't be councils owning these things, public ownership, but the asset ownership itself will be within these new entities. They want to see competency-based boards rather than elected boards or elected members on boards. And these will be statutory entities where they'll write new legislation to enable these places to exist. There's a lot of discussion around the options related to Māori interest, and there was representation from Ngāi Tahu, and it was great to have Liz Brown, the chair of our local Runanga Taumutu there yesterday. The options will include how do they influence strategic decision making, how are they recognised as far as the settlement for Ngāi Tahu back in 1998 and the idea of working together in closer collaboration. They wanted to see board accountability back to mana whenua, and also wondering how local influence comes about. If we have a large centralised model of decision making, how do the smaller, more remote, far away places have an involvement in those decisions? Then we talked about why these entities would be better for our communities, and the reasons put up by DIA were that there's a greater financial capability of new entity because it's able to borrow a lot more money than what local government's able to do. There'd be cost sharing across communities, and that would mean that for communities where upgrades have been obvious and needed for a number of years but haven't got across the line because of cost, that would no longer be a reason not to do it. They believe that there'll be far more efficiencies in the new entities once they're set up, and that was debated in the room, and was hard to see initially where the efficiencies were going to come from, and they believe there'll be improved outcomes for communities. I think that is one of the key pieces. A lot of the discussion is focused on what's good for council or not good for council. We need to think what's actually good for the person that's drinking the water or bathing in the water as a part of this discussion. But I'd have to say that based on what we saw yesterday, there hasn't been a compelling clear argument as to how this is going to look. There's been a piece of work done by Canterbury, which I shared with councillors yesterday, and that will have I want to organise a presentation of that data to us because it's there's a lot in there, and just having to read over it one evening won't do it justice. So that we might understand how we fit and what a Canterbury model could look like. The reason for doing that work was to ensure that we didn't double up on what DIA was doing, but took a council by council approach within Canterbury to be able to look at what the benefits and losses might be in doing something together as a region. And when we first looked at doing this, DIA pushed back and said, you're not thinking big enough, and they told us we must include the West Coast. We had discussions with the rest of the island about who wanted to do the work together, and everyone wanted to do their own thing. So it's purely a Canterbury piece of work and needs to be read in the context of the terms of reference that were set up at the beginning. But I'll be working with Murray to set up a presentation for councillors at a briefing session to be able to understand the data that sits in there. But we're wanting to have the best information that we can to make an informed decision on the compressed timeframes. The government wants these. The government's going to put us all into an entity. They're going to give us September till December this year to consult with our community and decide whether or not we want to be out or remain in. And the new entities will be set up to take over from the 1st of July 2024 is the proposal. I think that summaries yesterday. David, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to say?
No, I think that's pretty complete. I think one of the things that is incumbent on us is to make sure that information that the Mayor just gave the meeting is circulated out into the community along with the potential funding impact that we will face. Happy to answer any questions on my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mark.
Page 26, policy RS 201 and the changes therein. I wonder if the title should simply be RMA Hearing Commissioners. It's labelled RMA External Hearing Commissioners, but there are 5 councillors who are accredited as hearing commissioners. 2 of us are accredited as chairs of hearing panels that could also be under this policy. So the difference between excuse me, internal and external commissioners are a little blurred, and we all, internal and external commissioners, have all had to undertake and pass the MFE Making Good Decisions course. Some of us have now done it a number of times. So I just wonder if drawing the distinction between internal and external hearing commissioners is valid anymore, and we're simply hearing commissioners, whether we are councillors or independent planning experts.
I will defer to Mr. Harris for a comment, given that the policy is out of his department.
Thank you, David, and through you, Mayor Sam. I'm just having a look at that. I hear what Mark's saying. I can't see any reasons why that shouldn't be the case. I'll just have to check whether the delegations are aimed solely at external for a reason, if there's a legal reason there. So I'll need to double check that with some legal advice potentially. But on the face of it, I think what we were doing is trying to get away from a listing of commissioners, because now, as Mark rightly points out, all the commissioners need to go through a particular course, be they external or internal councillors, and then those people are listed on a database, MFE database, and we pick from that database in terms of people who are going to hear resource consents mainly. So the caveat that I need to check on that, I would, yes, offer support for Mark's suggestion.
So could we move it as it is today, with the caveat that it be amended, delegate the amendment to staff to make that change appropriate?
Yes.
Yes, can I have clarification, please, on page 28 with regards to delegations given to the property infrastructure delegation manual additions? I note that it's referring to the infrastructure group related to works, namely construction of works on private land in connection with. It doesn't mention who the group manager infrastructure actually is, and I'd like clarification. Where does this sit with asset responsibility to also access private land for works under the various legislation in the Local Government Act? It is named here. Hang on, I'll find it for you.
Okay, just want to do that, Murray. Comments?
Section 181.
All I'll comment on, I think, is that this is obviously written in terms of formalising the process to give notice for works on private properties. But I think the issue is the group manager infrastructure is myself, but it's better to have delegations in the name of a position rather than a person. I think that's more formal and more effective.
Okay,
Thanks, Murray.
That's fine with that one. So if that's the case, why, when we look at the property department delegation manual additions, we've actually got staff actually named in person under the Resource Management Act?
Perhaps I could assist with that. I think the people that are usually named are warranted, and their actual name needs to go on the warrant. So there's a different type of approach to the delegation, and where there's a warrant involved, you need to name the person because that name needs to appear on the warrant.
Thank you.
So there's three recommendations: receive the Chief Executive's report, B, approve the additions, changes to the delegations manual, and if we have C, delegates to Tim Harris the ability to amend the title of RS 201. Thank you, Councillor Alexander. Seconder, Mike Fitch. Any further discussion? All those in favour say aye. Against, sorry. Declare it carried. Next we have approval for an
Sam.
approval for an easement, yeah, on page 46. Moved Councillor Miller, seconded Lyle. Any discussion on this matter? All those in favour say aye. Against, declare it carried. Next item is on page 54, private plan change 62, rezoning of land in Leaston.
Sam, I'm going to have to declare an interest on this. Okay. You want me to leave the room?
That's a public meeting. You're able to just step away from the table and it'll be noted in the minutes. So Councillor Lemon will take.
Also move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. And seconder for the recommendation, Councillor Hassan.
And
I have a query on the recommendation.
well, I'd like to make comment as mover.
Yeah, you can make questions and that's
As,
fine. Alexander first.
as mover, I'd like to draw attention to the appropriate handling, I think, of Christchurch City Council's submission on the traffic effects of this plan change on Christchurch City. I think the Commissioner has quite appropriately dealt with in almost dismissing those concerns of Christchurch City. It was a rather long bow to draw that these sections in Leaston would have a dramatic effect on Christchurch City traffic, and hopefully we'll be seeing the end of Christchurch City making such submissions on our plan changes, particularly our small rural plan changes or our smaller, more westerly rural townships. It's been rather an irritant and a nonsense that they think that this amount of traffic from Leaston will dramatically affect Christchurch when the subdivisions on their western boundary produce a manifold further amount of traffic internal to their own networks.
Thanks, Mark. Deborah.
Trying to find my markings under this diligent. I have a query where it was for the National Policy Statement on Urban Development, just found it. Clause 5.50. Oh, sorry, 87. Yes, it is. There was an interpretation from the actual hearing commissioner that they previously considered the interpretation of clause 1.3 of urban environment and reached the conclusion that the National Policy Statement for Urban Development is not relevant to townships less than 10,000 PE. Could I have further clarification and understanding on how that National Policy Statement on Urban Development is applied within the UDS boundary and outside the UDS boundary with our townships across our district, please?
Thank you. Through Mayor Sam, I'll do my best. So the National Policy Statement on Urban Development applies to all urban development. Its policy and objectives do apply across the range of different urban environments. There is a specific definition around urban environment that talks about a population threshold of 10,000, but that definition only relates to certain aspects of the National Policy Statement, like Policy 8, and a number of other different aspects of the National Policy Statement. So, in summary, in a broad brush, it talks to all urban development, but there's parts of that policy statement that relate to high growth or areas over 10,000 heads of population. So it's a dual type of approach. Does that make that clear?
So just for clarification, was this plan change 62 for Leaston? Was it available to the Commissioner to actually consider the National Policy Statement for the urban environment?
Yes, it was, and he did. As I say, some of the policy's objectives have a broad application across all urban environments, whereas there's some special treatment for those larger urban environments over 10,000 heads of population.
Kia ora, Tim. Thank you.
Sorry, do you have other-
Right.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Kia ora, Tim. Thank you very much. Understanding that as a governor, it's not our position to question the decision, but opportunity to question the process. And given feedback from our community over this plan change, do you think that during the process, council have was there any areas that council may have or could have improved on the process in relation to the commissioner?
If I understand your question, there isn't really a process where the council relates to the commissioner. The commissioner has been given delegation to carry out a function, a council function, and makes a recommendation back to the full council. He's a qualified commissioner who's taken into account the evidence and has come to this recommendation. So there isn't really a part for the council, if I understand it, the governors to play a role other than this role here, which is to accept or reject the commission's decision, and at the beginning to either accept, reject, or accept in part in terms of the notification process. So they're the two key roles that the council plays, but they're basically given delegation for the commissioner to do the other consideration of the merits of the plan change application.
So relationship between a council and the submitters, there's no, you're confident in the process that you've undertaken with those that have submitted for the plan change?
Yes, unless it's something that I don't know, but yes, no, I've got no issues with the process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any further questions? So it's A, accept the recommendation of Independent Commissioner in regards to Plan Change 62 from D. Marshall, L. Martin, A. Formosa, M. and T. Saunders, B. Hammer, and J. and S. Howson to rezone land in Leaston, B, C, D, and E, as in the report. All those in favour say aye. Against? Declare it carried. Welcome back to the room, Murray. Table. The next item is on page 114. It's Plan Change 69, Lincoln. Decision on how to consider the private plan change request received from Rollison Industrial Developments Limited. Tim, do you want to say anything?
Well, I trust the council has read the report. This is a procedural decision in terms of whether to notify the application or not. It's a substantial proposal to rezone, I think, around 200 hectares in the southwest part of Lincoln, and the information is there before you. Happy to try and answer any questions that arise.
Okay, thank you. Is there a mover and seconder for this report? Mugford and
I'll second it, Sam.
thank you. Reid. Thanks. Questions from Mark and then Deborah.
I just wonder, for the benefit of our audience, Tim, if you were unable to expand on the role of the National Policy Statement on Urban Development in this and other plan changes as to why they've come in areas that we may not have expected plan changes previously.
So it is set out in the report, but the National Policy Statement on Urban Development, which was came into effect late last year, does offer a avenue by which plan changes that would formerly been difficult to proceed because they're outside of infrastructure boundaries, or they weren't identified in regional plans, or they're beyond the urban limit in regional or district plans, to be able to proceed. So this policy is aimed, I guess, at stimulating housing development, and it enables out of sequence or non-planned for, council planned for development to have an opportunity to be assessed in terms of the merit of the proposal. So it's called Policy 8, and a number of plan changes that have come before and are about to come to this council over the next couple of weeks are taking advantage of that pathway, and as this application is, and it allows for, as I say, applications that would formerly have been knocked out because they weren't consistent with high order planning documents to be able to be assessed and go through the normal RMA process. Does that answer your question, Councillor Alexander?
Thank you. It would be fair to say that this plan change has generated a lot of community interest. With regards to the notification process, can you please advise what our normal notification process would be to inform the public to participate in this process?
So as I understand it, my planners have all gone on a conference, except I have to go, I've got support in the back row there from Rachel, but as I understand it, the application is notified in the local newspapers and in the press, I believe, and also I think there is a statutory requirement that those people within a certain distance from the application are notified directly by mail and invited to submit. So, and it's also available on our website as well. So there's a public notification that is set out in the RMA that involves public notices, some direct notification to those more directly affected.
Supportive of Deborah being local councillor, I had substantial feedback from ratepayers, both existing in the new subdivisions and older residential subdivisions, raising concerns about the suitability of the site. Generally, the people have said they're not against developing Lincoln, but they are extremely concerned about the quality of that site, given it is a source of groundwater for the L2 River. It has extremely wet soils in places, and the existing development of Tifariki has been quite difficult with the ground conditions that they have found here. I think they're pointing to us as a council and saying, are you aware of the liability that you could be taking on through climate change and associated factors in this subdivision in the future? So whilst I'm not against development per se in Lincoln, I guess my ratepayers are raising concerns with me about what the future might hold for this potential site, and particularly around the waterways which are entrenched within that property. So it doesn't appear like we have many options available to us other than notifying this consent for public submission, which seems to be a fair way for all parties to submit. But I must raise with the council the views of my community that they're saying if this subdivision does go ahead, the environmental management of that site must be extremely well done to make sure this is a highly compliant subdivision. One of the other key things that at an early stage, and this will be addressed through the consenting process, is if you're talking the scale of the subdivision, what does this mean for our transport links? Is Springs Road going to be good enough? I note in the subdivision application it appears as an arterial road which would cross over the L2 and come down Moyers Lane to Ellesmere Road. The questions we might ask is the developer paying for the bridge and the upgrade of Moyers Lane? The landowners on Moyers Lane, for instance, are saying, well, if I'm going to have a motorway past my driveway, should I be able to subdivide my land and put housing in as well? So there's knock-on effects that people are saying intensification it also affects my amenity as well. This, of course, will be covered in the application process and the submission process, but there's a generalised feeling that perhaps they may not be heard, and we hope that our process is good enough that these people are heard and give the opportunity to speak.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sam. I guess I'd like to also convey my thoughts as well as supportive of what Deborah and Grant have both said. I've had some calls from our community and further abroad actually around the suitability of the site, the extra strain on infrastructure. And I'm interested to hear from you, Tim, mana whenua's stance, if there is an alteration to flows and springs, their view on that.
Well, their views will be captured, hopefully, through the substantive process in which submissions are called for, and then that's heard in a RMA hearing. So I can't speak for mana whenua there, and we'd welcome any input and submissions processed.
Kia ora, Tim. Thank you very much. Probably more debate around this particular plan change than the others so far. I appreciate most of your planners are obviously at the national conference at the moment, but I was wondering, I know I've asked you this previously, but just for the benefit wider, what sort of support council can provide or direct community members to if they wish to make a submission, just because for many people this is quite outside their usual activity and they don't necessarily know how to make an effective submission. Thanks.
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, Sophie, you have raised this with me before. We're always available to have discussions or meetings with interested parties. We did appoint a friend of Submitter for the Fulton Hogan quarry, and there was some suggestion, I think, that the friend of Submitter would be useful to address a number of these different plan changes that have been thrust upon us over the last couple of months, and it is, I think, a reasonable idea for the council to consider. The biggest issue, I suppose, is the cost of appointing a friend of Submitter. With the Fulton Hogan application, we're able to recover substantial costs from the applicant with their agreement. It may be a different story with a range of different applicants across a wider geographic area, and getting an agreement or some cost sharing across all of those, some 16 so different applicants may be challenging. But I'll be happy to take some direction from the council on this. The other option, of course, is that the council picks up the costs themselves, and to give the council some idea, indicative costs, I would guess would be in the range of, to deal with a number of different plan changes, would be in the order of $10,000 to $15,000. But again, I come back to it, we are available either directly, face-to-face, or phone or email, to be able to hopefully provide some support and direction for submitters or people that are interested in the applications.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Just musing on the sites of springs and natural water bodies there, and obviously we're operating under our current district plan, but what weight is given by the Commissioner or ourselves in our submissions around, and we spent some considerable time with the district plan review looking at Wahitatu and Waitonga sites, and if those were identified, what weight is given to that that's in our proposed new district plan? How would that process manifest itself?
Look, I'm sorry, I can't give you a definitive answer on terms of the weighting. It would be taken into account in terms of the assessment of the rules. It depends what status or what rules applied, and their status is a non-complying or discretionary activity, and I can't, off the top of my head, provide you with that analysis under our proposed plan. I'm even unclear what Wahitapu sites might be affected by that. I'd have to go back and do some research, and happy to do so. I just can't give you an off-the-cuff answer here.
I guess the question really is more around what weight can be given to a proposed plan in this process rather than those specifics.
Yeah, so under a proposed plan, there's the weight really depends on where the proposed plan is in its process. So at this point, it's only the start of the process, and so little weight at this point can be given. And in terms of, and Rachel, help me out here if you would, we can give some weight to policies and objectives, but not to rules until they're through the whole process. And the reason for that weighting is that obviously we've just received submissions. The provisions of the district plan could well change through that process. So giving them a lot of weight at this stage might be a bit premature. And in terms of the statutory, am I correct? Policies and objectives, Rachel, have some weight. Rules have no effect until they're right through the whole process.
Yes, so objectives and policies have weight. Now, the degree of weight varies depending on whether they've been subject to challenge through the submissions, and therefore if they are, they get less weight, of course, whereas if they haven't, then the community is obviously happy with them, and so they have more weight, but not full weight yet because it's still only the proposed plan. Provisions around heritage have some weight now. So if we're talking around cultural sites and things like that, they will have some weight now. Provisions around water have some weight now. But as Tim says, it's basically a case of where the proposed plan is at the time that this plan change to the operative plan gets to hearing will determine the degree of weight that the themes of the proposed plan will be able to be considered at the time that this change to the operative plan is considered. So it's a bit of a basket case.
Moving feast.
But yes, we will be considering those things as part of the 42A reporting at the time that this plan change is considered before a hearing.
And just want to note, there's a couple of councillors, or there's 4 in the room who will be sitting on those hearings. So discussing it in this type within this meeting, I think is quite appropriate. We're not making decisions around that or asking you for interpretation decisions. We're hearing from staff in this matter, so we have no problem with you continuing to sit at the table as those wider district plan matters are canvassed by staff in the next few minutes. Councillor Reid.
I just wanted to continue on with from what Grant had said, and he brought up about Moyes Lane, and just also need to be wary that we've got the Little River Rail Trails running through there as well. So we want to hopefully, when this plan it becomes more formalised going through the process, that is taken into consideration as well. Otherwise, that route might be compromised going through to Little River from Lincoln.
Thank you for all those comments. We've got to move and second it. Yes, Councillor McGuinness.
Sorry, this was just sparked by what you were saying before, Rachel. What happens if something like the MPS on highly productive land comes out partway through this process as well, given that this is productive dairy lands?
Yeah, we would have to take that into account. It comes into before the consideration, so that would have full weight, as I understand it. It's a higher order document, so if that was actually put into force before the decision was made, that would be part of the Commissioner's decision framework.
Thank you.
All those in favour that we resolve to accept the request for notification, say aye. Against? Declare it carried. Thank you. The next item is Plan Change 75 on page 131. Plan Change 75 decision on how to consider the private plan change request received from your section limited. Murphy Alexander, seconded Bland. Any discussion or questions that people have? Yes, Councillor Hassan.
Just with regards to the issue of that was brought up with the national policy statement on versatile soils, is this area also located on versatile soils? Will those two policies have to be seen in conjunction with each other?
The national policy statement hasn't been released yet, so it'll have its own definition and classification of versatile soils. So I really can't answer that question clearly. Maybe Rachel could provide a bit of information in terms of the quality of the soils in that corner. So I think it probably class 3. What it means?
Assuming it's class 3, and Tim, if you'd like to open up the GIS, we can have a look for you. Class 3 are the soils that are outside the regional definition of versatile land, but included in the current draft national definition. So, yeah. So once again, it will depend on what national statutes are in place at the time the decision on this plan change is made, and they are the ones that will be considered by the Commissioner.
We won't jump into the areas just now. If that's a question that can be answered outside of the meeting time frame. Thank you. Councillor Miller.
I guess just referring back to our meeting on Monday where we talked about growth patterns and transportation, this more logically fits into our growth pattern where we have a significant motorway, a significant MRT corridor, and the ability of us to service this population. So I'm not anti-growth. I think well-managed development, as we've seen within Selwyn, is good for our communities, is good for our schools, is good for our employment, and we've got good industrial links across in our zone. And it really rams home to me the urgency around us developing our transport hub, both commercial and residential hubs. And I think Mr. Carr's in the room, and we had a very good proposal from him earlier on about a combined rail road transport thing. And I think that was, perhaps it was before its time in some respects, and we should be pulling it out of the drawer and shaking it off. And it may not be on that land, but it may be somewhere in Salon. But the takeaway from that meeting was that if we're going to have higher density housing, to do that, it should be located around green space, and our large green spaces in Ralston are Foster Park. But we also have a huge green space which is currently in farmland called the District-wide Park. It just seems to me maybe we should be actively looking now about what the land around our district park looks like in the future. If we are to be 100,000 people or whatever it's going to be in Selwyn, that could be our Hagley Park, and we need to be signalling to those landowners around that land holding, hey, maybe we're talking about a high density neighbourhood which uses that large scale park as its green space, because that seems to be making sense. And if we don't take the opportunity now to signal that now through our planning process, I think we're missing an opportunity both for both Ralston and for our future residents. So I'm happy to support this, but I think that as a council we need to do some further urgent work on looking about future growth patterns.
Thanks, Councillor Miller, and yeah, agree. We need to be looking bigger. The discussion on Monday with the Greater Christchurch partners, I raised how we would look at Salon at a population of 300,000 people and what that would mean for our settlement patterns. And the conclusion from our table at the end of the day was we moved from a nodal settlement pattern to a corridor settlement pattern. The lift in value along corridors is shared through inclusionary zoning, providing better social outcomes to give win-wins across the sectors of our community. The local revenue through congestion charging or fuel tax gives an opportunity for more frequent and smarter locations of public transport and transitions between modes. And as an exporting district, our freight and people movements complement an efficient system of living and trade. And there's quite a change from we have a township and then we just have concentric rings of growth around that township. It's a complete mindset renewal that we're going to have to go through and thinking about where future growth lands. Councillor Alexander.
Yeah, I support the intent of Councillor Miller's comments. There's actually another part of the district plan in and around our district park that would prohibit that kind of development, and that's called the Airport Noise Corridor, which a battle that was fought some time ago got it shifted off most of Ralston, but the remnant of it is over that northeastern corner of Ralston, and I'm not sure that it will be shifted under our new district plan either. Prevents large-scale housing intensification under that noise corridor. It is in itself a bit of a farce. It's a 50 decibel noise corridor for air traffic in a zone that has ambient noise from the motorway / State Highway 1 at a higher level. But I suspect the airport company would fight with considerable resources to any shifting of the noise corridor, even though it doesn't pass the common sense test.
Make sure we're back on track with that.
Very quickly, absolutely support you, Mark. What a nonsense. It's just a constraint on growth. Double glazing, triple glazing, whatever it is, does away with noise. It's just a nonsense. And I think planning should override that.
We are on tab 9, page 131, that in respect to plan change 75 for Selwyn District Lodge by your section, we accept the request for notification. Moved Alexander and Bland. All those in favour say aye. Against, declare it carried. Thank you. The next page, item is on page 144, Te Ara RTS Sustainability Report. So remover and seconder for the report, Lyle and Gallagher. Who's presenting this report? Douglas. This information. Anything? Any questions that people have?
I was just going to question how we might be sharing this information wider with our community. Will it be, so it's really a question of the Chief Executive, is how we might share this information with the wider community about what we've been doing in this building.
Through our council call initially, Councillor Alexander, and then other communication channels that we're going out. We're going to be spending a fair bit of time out with the community over the next few months, as I articulated earlier on.
I think the time for that is when the building opens, when the people have been able to come through the building and ensuring that we've got good information as people have their first visit and spend some time wandering around about the features that we have included in the build. Moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Against, declare it carried. Next item is on page 149, Solid Waste Monthly Update. Moved and seconded that we received the report. Lyle and Miller. Any questions that people have? Councillor Hassan?
Yes.
Andrew, do you want to come to the front?
Sorry, I'll find the. Oh. Hi. Page 149, the collection operations. I note, and I will admit that I'm one councillor who has had a sticker actually put on my rubbish tin, and it was for no lids. And I felt a little bit confused because it was an ice cream lid and it had a 1 and a triangle on it. So I think, you know, and this isn't the first issue that has been approached to me with regards to the fact that many of our recycling now doesn't require us to actually put in lids. You've got to separate the lids away from the actual container. And I just wonder, how widely is that actually known? I always went by the fact that we used to have a sticker, we still have it, on our fridge, and it told you how to recycle, what you could recycle. Is there a possibility of updating that information to all of our public?
Thank you. Yes, we have done that extensively. So we've done mail outs to the entire district. We've included fridge magnet guides to the entire district in the rates invoicing. We've done extensive advertising in the newspaper and on social media. So I'm not really sure what else we could do to get that any further than what it already has. It's always been no lids. It's just that in the more recent attempts to improve the quality of recycling, it's been something that's just been increasingly focused on.
It doesn't matter, irrespective of whether you've got an ice cream container and it does actually have a 1 on it as the lid, that's not recyclable. It'll be a 2 or a 5, but the one of the things that is always talked about is that the messaging is so confusing. So this is one attempt sort of across the country to get consistency and to say no lids of any type. And that then makes it a single message rather than saying, oh, big ones are okay or bumpy ones are okay, but not small ones. So that's an attempt, I guess, pretty much at a national level to try and get consistency and a simple message. So one of the issues with ice cream lids in particular is that because they're basically flat, the machinery thinks it's paper. It's super tricky for the any sort of machinery to try and separate that from paper. So it ends up contaminating the paper stream, meaning that a really low value material like mixed paper is even less valuable because it's full of ice cream lids and other plastics. Yeah. Is there an opportunity that when we have a mail out, we actually mail a sticker that can be put on the actual rubbish tin lids? So when people go to lift it up, it's opened already. It's already done. Well, I haven't done it.
Yeah, I think Andrew's just suggested that has happened, including stickers and magnets and inserts in paper direct to homes, as well as social media and in our local newspapers. So it's been pretty well canvassed. If anyone's got any other ideas about how you reach people, great. Councillor Reid.
Surely we have a stock of that here that people can ask for if they missed it out of their letterbox, because maybe Councillor Heston could just go down and ask. Yeah.
Great. Andrew, really good to see around that curbside update that no trucks were rejected in February. I mean, not that we ever got particularly bad compared to some neighbours, but there was a huge turnaround to see trucks being rejected, and now to have actually none of them right through the whole month of February is really good result. So well done on the info that you've put out to the community, the checking of bins and the reporting that I've had back through that, not taking a punitive approach, but an information and education approach has been hugely successful. So well done.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really an outstanding result. I think 3% is probably some of the best in the country.
Yeah. Sophie and Grant.
Kia ora, thank you very much. I just wanted to celebrate the colour separated tipper bins. I didn't realise that they were there, so I think I'm just going to set up a crate at home and start separating my glass out so I can put them in the right bins. And just to note on Deborah's point, there has been a lot of stuff come through. That said, there will always be complaints from people who believe that there is more that can be recycled, and it's true, there is always more that can be recycled. The trouble is the cost implications of actually sorting it so that it can be recycled effectively is unfortunately not in this current climate economically viable. So we could want it, but we have to start valuing things differently as a society and try to do the whole circular economy thing, choose things that can be recycled rather than just what we want to buy.
Well, what an outstandingly run portfolio this is. Talking about the increase in tonnage, 2,000 extra tonnes, which may be just in part due to our growth. I just want to confirm that our charging is in line with urban refuse stations and we're not getting people driving out because we're cheaper. That's not a big.
Yeah, it's a good point, and we are less expensive than Christchurch. It's a bit of a balance between obviously covering costs and not sort of making too much money. I don't know that we've received nothing anecdotally about loads from Christchurch. I guess the fuel costs associated with transporting it out here would hopefully be prohibitive, but
it's just the commercial guys I'm looking for. I mean, we don't want to discourage or encourage fly tipping by making the charges so high that people go, I'd rather dump it in the local drain or the local riverbed.
Yep.
But when it becomes cost effective for a truck and trailer to come out here and dump here rather than somewhere else, that's when we get into issues like this.
Yeah, absolutely. So the commercial guys all have bulk arrangements with private transfer station operators, and they get better deals than what we can provide them. Yep.
Te Rapu, Andrew, thank you very much for the report. On previous occasions, you've spoken about the educational aspect of waste and bringing schools through our facility. How is that looking, and when is that likely to be brought into play?
Yep. So we are working with the recently appointed architects on the design of the structures. The education centre is the plan on that was to get a relocated classroom block and refurbish it in keeping with the reuse. So it still will be some time off, but we do, when we get requested, we do take tours of groups through. We just don't proactively offer it at the moment because we're not ideally set up for it.
Good job, thank you.
Yep. Cheers.
Yeah, just as far as the contamination of the bins goes with recycling, have you any statistics on, is it in villages, is it reserves, or is it on tourist routes? Have you got any way of knowing where this problem is?
We haven't done any detailed analysis of where exactly it's happening. We have got someone in the background who's uploading all the rejected bins, and we haven't worried about recording any of the educational stuff, just the outright rejected through really bad bins. But it will be interesting once that data is uploaded to see if we can sort of identify hotspots where we might better focus or direct our education or contact with residents. Yeah. But at the moment, no.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrew. It's been moved and seconded that we receive the report. All those in favour say aye. Against? Declare it carried. Thank you. Next, we move to the Transportation Monthly Update on page 154 of today's agenda. Again, moved and seconded that we receive this report. Councillor Reid and Gallagher. Welcome, Andrew and Mark, to the room.
Good afternoon, councillors. I shall start off with a quick update. We had a fairly good go through things last time round, so I'll try and make it brief. Transport Activity Management Plan, I think the key thing that I hinged a comment around that is in terms of the discussions with NZTA on our funding bid for the next transport program under the NLTP, noting their comment that basically on a national perspective, in terms of all their, what they believe is all their adding up of their lower expenditure levels expected over all the different activity classes, that equals what their expected expenditure or income is going to be for that period. So they've got some serious problems in regards to how they're going to balance the books. And in terms of, for instance, maintenance and renewals, what's been asked for over the country exceeds the upper limit of their funding band. So yeah, there's going to be some serious conversations occurring within NZTA on how they manage this. And through our LTP processes, we've been working with you in terms of establishing our budgets and funding. Parallel process we have to undertake with NZTA, doing the same thing for the national program. And so we've been providing that information. We've had an initial assessment by NZTA in February, and in April, the final crunch will come in terms of where NZTA will release their view on where they sit in regards to how they may, support or otherwise funding requests. So we don't know yet, but basically the NZTA have said to us, collectively, I suppose, as a country and road controlling authorities, there's going to be some disappointments. So just wanted to let you know that that process is underway, and hopefully we should have some information by the end of April, beginning of May. So moving on to a few other things, the Canterbury Regional Land Transport Plan that went out for submission, it's closed. I put in there a summary that I quickly got from Environment Canterbury, 81 submissions, 2 of which were from Selwyn, and as I said in there, a lot of them were around the Wood End bypass. And so you can see there in terms of the dates how they're tracking through, which again a parallel process to LTPs and NLTPs in terms of getting a an outcome to that by the end of June. Land change requests, you've had a look at those, a couple of those already just before. I note for the rest of the Rolleston plan changes, we're currently building a transport model that is going to look at all the cumulative effects of all those plan changes so that we can be in a good position to look at it on a network basis as opposed to just individual plan change on an individual plan change basis, which you don't necessarily get the whole impact of what may be occurring. And so that's going to form a lot of our work through in terms of when evidence is being produced and discussions with commissioners and all those various things that will have to follow through. Good news is, I've mentioned to Bob and Jenny before, the Colgates Road legislation process, we received no objections to our process through the Environment Court. So now it's just a matter of stepping through the rest of the process to get those roads gazetted and legalised, which I think I said should be happening in April, May. So I think that's a very good result and a testament to following good process, and I congratulate the property team in terms of them and their input to that critical path to get us to this point, which I think, as I've said before, has been a problem 100 years or more in the making. Rolleston State Highway 1 access, again, as I mentioned probably previously, NZTA working through for the detailed business case phases for that. They have selected a preferred tenderer and are just going through the motions, getting them signed up. So again, that's a process that will track through for the rest of the year to try and which will inform in more detail with more options what may be available in terms of that upgrade through Rolleston from the end of CSM2 to basically Duns Crossing Road. I added in there this time the West Melton traffic signals. In actual fact, we had a meeting with the project manager for that this morning, Murray England and myself. So we just were going through all the various bits and pieces with that. And of course, Murray's got quite a few services that go through there, like the Whopping Big Water Race that we need to worry about. And all that needs to be brought along in the process to make sure that we get looked after in that respect. Moving on to the Greater Christchurch Partnership, in terms of the 2050 spatial plan, there's still the work going on to get all that geared up, but I suppose the really interesting one is the MRT study business case. And so at this point, we're looking at the consultant for that providing an interim report to the Greater Christchurch Partnership in April, May, and that will outline some of the options that they have been investigating, what the viability of those are, to probably just get a steer from the partnership at that point on, you know, what is thought or should be taken forward from there. I can say that from what I've seen in recent times, I think the consultant has done well to bring in some other options that hadn't been necessarily thought about, or maybe had been thought about but not necessarily considered that strongly. So that's good, and particularly in regards to Rolleston. So it will be a pretty important bit of work that will eventuate from that in terms of how we take it forward. Other than that, just a quick update on that CTOC issue with the traffic signals, and myself and my counterpart at WIMAC have been having discussions with the City Council, and I think we're getting some progress on that, which is good, so that we're just quietly working through that. But at the moment, nothing changes in terms of our maintenance and operations of the traffic signals. We just need to formalise it now under the new City Council type of arrangements. And the last thing on my list here is I've attached the Salon Road Controlling Authority report issued by Reg, and we talked through all those sort of aspects, all those measures, I think last year, so I'm not expecting to go through all that again, but that just gives you the latest update on all our sort of performance parameters that NZTA, Reg, local government track on all of our respective behalves.
Thanks, Andrew. Also, just note that Andrew and I are working with NZTA and with letters to Nicole Rosie to think about an opening, soft as it will be, for an acknowledgement of the Southern Motorway project. Due to the staggered nature of the opening, the keenness to get on and use it as it was available, there wasn't an empty space to be able to do something where we could all walk and cycle the space and go and explore. So I do want to acknowledge the work that NZTA has done in that investment, and host some form of picnic events that would enable just a marker to say thanks, and that will be going to them soon. Andrew, I wonder in the MRT space, it would be quite good to have a presentation to all of our councillors here. Just thinking back, the conversation that we had around public transport earlier, it was almost, our council was at the bottom end of the process, and were kind of told after the submission had been completed where we were at. And so if we could, following the Greater Christchurch presentation, once the work is complete, actually have a presentation here as part of your report would be helpful in the MRT space particularly. And lastly, just to note that we've been working on some signage for the district to go on our major roading spaces into and out of the district, with the first and most important one on the Southern Motorway. And that's currently in a design location type discussion, but is bubbling away at the moment. If you want to say that.
Yes, no, absolutely, Mayor Sam, in regards to the MRT update, I think we have to just let it go through the process in terms of it being looked at first by CAG, then go to the partnership, and then from there we'll get a steer on where they want to take things, and from that point we'll be able to formulate a process to then be able to communicate that to all the stakeholders, and definitely we would be expecting the consultant to front up and run through all where they've got to with all of that.
Yeah, I'm pleased you brought up Southern Motorway completion and signage, Sam. I brought up before Christmas the fact that there's no signage on the Southern Motorway to indicate where to turn off to get to Prebbleton when you're coming in from the south. It was picked up by the local newspaper. I believe Mr. Hyland was very upset with my comments. Nothing has happened. You still don't know where you're going. I have continual reports of people coming to Prebbleton, ending up way down at Curlitz Road because there's no signage to say turn left here. All it says is Hornby and Airport. It is not finished. It is totally Christchurch centric and not good enough.
Thank you. Page 155, section 4.3, private plan change requests. Is this funding that we have to actually find, is this recoverable from the applicant at all, or is it a percentage? Is it full recovery? How does it work?
Yep, no, so that's a very good question. We're going to be recovering everything we can. It may not be 100% of all the work because it actually needs to inform some of our processes as well, but certainly we are certainly justified in recovering costs from the applicant on any work that gets done on these plan changes.
And just with regards to our development contributions, given that we have these 11,000 new lots, with regards to our development contributions, at yesterday's meeting, we're probably one of the cheapest with regards to development and collecting DCs. Have we actually addressed that very well in our 10-year plan, given all of these plan changes?
Certainly the development contribution policy that's been produced for the draft LTP has taken into account all our future population forecasts and also our land use predicted at that time. Certainly some of these plan changes are sitting outside the future urban boundary, which would not necessarily have been catered for. But I think the point is that, you know, we'll be reviewing the development contribution again in 3 years' time, so we can make those adjustments. Certainly, with the work that we're doing with generating this new traffic model, that will actually help inform that, because it will identify any further issues on the network that we then need to start plugging the gaps in, and then that generates that aspect in terms of dialing those projects and collecting those development contributions on that basis.
And just clarification will be, and for clarification, we will be looking at this as a comprehensive development along all of the Greater Christchurch Urban Development Strategy, not just by township or plan change by plan change.
Probably be good if Tim was still here, but I think basically how I can answer it is that the critical bit of work that's going to have to be carried out, and as I said before, underway, is the Greater Christchurch 2050 Spatial Plan. And that is where the partnership needs to sit down and work out where all this, where all the growth is going to go and how it's going to be managed in a sustainable way. So whether it's low, medium, high density development, that all has to be considered and worked out on a spatial basis, which is what I've said before, how MRT plays such an important role or factor into deciding that type of aspect in terms of where those MRT corridors go, and then you consolidate your growth and high density development of, say, for instance, around those corridors.
Thank you. Andrew, was there any time frame given when you met with the consultant in regards to West Melton traffic lights? Is there a time frame for construction?
Yes.
Can you share it?
Yes, but you may be disappointed. I was a little bit disappointed this morning, but I was explained the reason why I should be disappointed. We met with the project manager, which is from NZTA. So he was basically running through what they need to achieve to be able to design and implement this project. And so based on where they're at the moment, it is probably likely to be that it would start work in not this coming year, but the year after. And so that we'd probably be in a position to have the signals built or constructed 22, 23. The reason being is the complexity around the issues with the services and the fact that with the water race, that they can only realign, replace, repipe that in winter next year because they can't do it over summer. And then they'll do that first and then hit the construction of the actual intersection and the realignment of West Melton Road in the summer period. Noting that they've also got to acquire the land for the West Melton Road realignment, which will take some time, as you know, under public work processes. So we were hoping it was going to be this coming summer, but it's not going to be that.
Thank you. And just a note to the Mayor about your comments about the CSM2 opening ceremonies. We did get one in. We were able to have an opening for the Whedon's Overbridge with Whedon School, which was an early project. And so we did have one community event celebrating an opening of part of the project, even if we couldn't celebrate the whole project.
Given the difficulties around the West Melton traffic lights, councillors Hassan, Salon and myself are happy for Lincolns to be brought forward. That can be done in summer 21, no problem at all. So, that's no problem. So if we're all in agreement, we'll pass that this afternoon. Some some bouquets rather than brickbats. I mean, now we've had time to reflect on the Southern Motorway's completion. What a jolly great piece of infrastructure. How good has it been for Ralston and Selwyn and the wider Canterbury area? You know, we can always complain about the time and construction and the dust and everything else, but the usability of it and the difference it's made to our community and the wider Selwyn community is amazing. And we must thank governments and previous governments for actually having the foresight to do these things. Yeah, so that's that. The second bouquet is to Andrew for the network approach for the new. I think that's well done, because too often we look at subdivisions in isolation, and having the ability to look at a network approach for these subdivisions I think is great. So well done on that one, Andrew. The question I have, I guess, is just around the growth. I suppose it's an old chestnut. When does it become the opportunity to say to NZTA, particularly around Springs Road, that this is actually a state highway now rather than a local road? Because clearly when you come off the motorway, which is a state highway, and go to Lincoln, it's not an arterial anymore, it's got beyond that. And so are we in a position to advocate for that? I'll leave that thought with you. And the last question I have on you is, do you support free buses?
Andrew, maybe we could ask for the response to that second piece in a future report, the process for state highway transfer or whatever, because there's a number of roads around our district that beyond Springs Road that fit into where we might see that there's a change. So bring that back to us rather than just an off-the-cuff response now. But if you could answer the other two, it would be great.
I suppose free buses are good if you want to go on a bus. So yeah, no, it's all right. So the thing is that as you may remember, we went through the business case process for the existing PT network with, it was all bus orientated. That's the foundations and rest of network. The consultant did do some studies on that in terms of the attractiveness of, if you made everything free, would everybody flock to it? That's not necessarily shown by the results of that analysis. The thing is that even if you make something free, if it's not good enough, people are still not going to use it. So if it's not frequent enough, isn't reliable, doesn't take you where to go, it can be as free as you like and it still won't attract people. So you have to get the right balance in terms of making it into something that's going to be attractive to people to use, that they think it's going to cost them less than, for instance, using their car, but also it's a trip that will be competes with the car in regards to making it attractive enough for them to use a bus as an alternative. So yeah, it's a very interesting conversation, but I would probably, as I say, stick by those points that I've made to you in regards to the general concept of that. I actually think it's better, and I've advocated this as well, is that to have, for instance, a flat zone structure over all of Greater Christchurch, so that if you jump on a bus at West Melton, it's the same as jumping on a bus at New Brighton and everything in between. And I think there's actually more benefit in that, because you then get some revenue in the fact that then you can actually start working to improving the services. The point is nothing's free. Somebody's got to have to pay for it somewhere down the track. And while, yes, the comment can be made that, well, we can increase our ECAN rates to be able to compensate for that, remember that component of the PT servicing is only a quarter of the funding. 50% in theory should come from the fare box. The other quarter comes from NZTA, and the other quarter comes from the ECAN rate. So it's a bit of a different or difficult balancing act in terms of that side of things.
Can I get a refund on the train ticket I bought 3 years ago that I'm supposed to be using now?
No, because they didn't even put the train in for us to be able to buy the ticket, Grant.
From Ralston, Sam.
Where is the train? I know. Let's see this train. $200 million at the time, I think it was. No, I think we might have found it was more than that.
Yes, sorry, I think I know what you're talking about now. I had all sorts of visions that you had a train ticket stub that you wanted a refund. Well, we have asked numerous times around that 100 million and where is it coming from and why can't we get hold of it? And I think, as I might have mentioned in an email that was sent out recently, is that it's been a bit like tracing smoke in the wind in terms of getting a response from either the government and or NZTA.
I think the conversation for the mass rapid transport and train from the Greater Christchurch Partnership piece in response back from the Minister of Transport, Woods, is still, we come up with a proposal. They still want to fund something here for Christchurch. So it'll be interesting to see once we actually get to that proposal piece, whether they can still back the comments that they've made thus far. Lastly, just Andrew, thank you for the work that you did to get Hoskins Road work on the state highway made a whole lot safer than it used to be. It mirrors the work that we've done on out towards Leaston along that road, just having bays where you can turn right by staying in the middle of the road without having to pull over to the left into an uncertain territory and cross both lanes in a single move is a lot safer for people. And Hoskins Road is a key entry point into Rolleston, and the growth that's here really does help connect the west, and will be even greater effect once we get the flyover in place. But the NZ did a good job there, even though it was really annoying having the road closed for a month while they did it. But it's those small things that you've got to put up with to get the improvements that we now have. So thank you. Mark, shall we move on to your part of the report?
Sam, sorry.
Right, Jenny.
I just wanted to reiterate what Sam said. I'm getting a great lot of comments about the Hoskins Road, so just good work to you. And I know it's been a long process for you, but it is appreciated by those that use it. So well done. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou. Use of buses is free buses. We can get into Christchurch now without the council's metro card, but it doesn't mean staff and councils are using it. So it's not a cost, it's a convenience thing. We pay to go in a car, but you don't necessarily want to pay. It's not paying on the bus, it's just getting to the right place at the right time. Going on the motorway is a lot quicker though. With yeah, that's right.
The express bus down the motorway is awesome, and you don't have to find anywhere to park.
Yeah, that's right. I'll take most of this read. I'll just be a few. I just added in some extra information on the corridor management, and there are some audits there that dangerous results. So the corridor managers works with those straight away and deals with the contractors. So it's no specific contractors. Lots of issues. It's just depending on the site, some issues that go on, things like that. There's a bit of discussion about Salon Road and Spatial Road at the moment, but it's more about delays than them being dangerous sites. So that's an ongoing thing. Road maintenance renewals. So we're still forecast to be close to the budget for this year. Been a big month of February. We spent nearly $1 million on reseals, and that included the Jones Road AC, which is a big chunk of that. And if you've been down there, you'll see that it's much nicer pavement than it was before. But it obviously comes at a cost. So we're still forecasting close to budget because of discussions we've had about approval to go. But we have had some seal failures identified that we'd like to actually do before the winter, but it means we're actually spending about $190,000 on doing those rather than trying to maintain over the winter and things like that. So it's just, I was asked to raise that, what the feeling was, whether you were comfortable with us doing that sort of work before the winter while the weather and the ground conditions are still good, to do those isolated repairs now, like the Telegraph Road and Horada Road and things like that, just to make them safe rather than trying to deal with them over the winter, that sort of thing. We've also got about over $4 million of unsealed pavement maintenance meddling already identified that we're going to have to do over the next 3 years or so, along with everything else that comes up. So it's always a problem with unsealed roads, as we've discussed before. So it's not really new. Speed limits. So going to bring those, last time, to our council briefing. The list is a bit longer than I anticipated, but there's we probably do need to make those changes and deal with some of the requests, but we won't be able to do all of them. But the signing of the new rule is probably going to be December 2021 now, so it tends to change a month at a time every time we have a meeting about that. So that's just life of the Ministry of Transport, I think, and the draft rule as a result, and the consultation and the feedback, they're still working through that and making any changes with it. Pre-order intersections, so you've been at Shan's Flakes. It's quite a bit of change there and quite a hurry down there with the work going on, so that'd be good to keep progress on that. Walkers Road widening, that's pretty much being completed. That's a project that's been around for about 4 or 5 years now. I think we finally got that done. It's actually made quite a difference. If you go down there, you may not notice, but we've actually widened more on one side than we have the other. That's just a shift across a bit for some underground services, but we'll keep the road markings the same as we were before. But I think most people going down there probably won't even notice that, but we keep them as they were until we do a reseal, then we'll just shift across a half a metre. That's all it is. It's just to keep the wheel track away from some underground services there that may cause us some problems. And the only other thing I was going to mention, road safety update, just Jessica and Steph put in there. Just one thing on the under the young drivers and the mental program. Jess had a meeting the other day and had invited people to come along and get people signed up. And there's a mental program for a lot of immigrants and things like that. So people who have struggled to get through the whole license process, and setting up some local mentors and training them up to actually guide them through it. And had a few sign up in the past and had a few issues with it, but had a meeting the other day, and of the 25 that turned out, they all 25 had signed up to actually start doing it. So she did a really good job presenting that and making a good case on why they should take part. So they've actually got more than what they need now, probably, but it was just a really good story. So that's about it. So I think there'll be some questions there.
Yeah, there are. Just on the reseals and some of the work that's been done, there's some places that we look across the district and it's been done really well. And I just think back to Lectures Road that was done a couple of years ago, and gets a lot of use, and the response from the community there was really positive. A Telegraph Road was done probably at a similar time, and there's parts of that road that received almost a full treatment to bring it up to speed once Fonterra had opened, and the road deteriorated very quickly after that. There's sections there that have held together quite well, but there's bits that even just the sum of actually way more work than I would expect on a road that's just had that level of investment in the last 5 years. Are you able to talk about where the costs for things lie based on work done the last 12 months, within the last 24 months, or 5 years on? Is it just it's up to us? Because it just seems like that Telegraph Road, some of it's done well, some of it's not. It could be a ground condition, although it's pretty stony and there's no water underground for a long way there. Is it operators? Is it drivers? Is it supervisors? Is it out checking? Where does responsibility for those bits sit?
Well, I don't think there's any bits that we've done the rehabs on that are all okay. It's the bits in between those and outside of that we need to now do rehabs on, because Telegraph Road, we've done gradual overlays on the sections that were causing us real problems before. There's other sections we just did repairs and reseals, knowing that they weren't going to last that long because we hadn't enough money to do all the rehabs we need to do. So of the 19 kilometres, there's probably over 15 kilometres that needs a rehab now, and it's deteriorated quite a bit just in the last 12 to 24 months, particularly down the bottom end, but also up the top and just above Charing Cross. So a lot of that has been identified for future rehabs if we get the funding to do it. If we're trying to prioritise which ones you do first, Telegraph Road will be a road that you do ahead of, say, Wards Road or something like that in terms of rehab, but it is deteriorating, and you can see that it is a bit worse on the side heading up towards Starfield, just because of loaded Fonterra trucks, I guess. It creates an impact. It's about 25% heavy traffic use that road. So it's just an older pavement, most of it, that was there and been widened. Now it just needs a strengthening, needs an overlay on it. So it's not because of the work we've done previously that hasn't worked. It's just under a bit of stress with the loading it's got on it, that's all.
Okay. And I guess it's been jogged to my memory just like looking at what has happened on Wards Road and the work outside road metals at the moment. And so there's been extensive roadworks there, and no sooner is the road opened up and it's soft, I'm guessing, in patches, and the top surface has been ripped off and back to shingle in some parts. And I just feel like a week after something's gone down, that's not the right outcome, and patching it with asphalt as it is at the moment. I'm hoping that's not the end result of what's going to be there. So just wondering what's the process to ensure that when we spend a lot of money on these works, that we actually end up with a great outcome at the end.
Yeah, there was a couple of bits there, and some of the material that was used was actually from road metals. Isn't as good as we can get, say, from the Salon River, we crushed there and things like that. So they decided to use it because it was there, not much gardening, and it was available road metals right next door. But it hasn't gone down that well. The repairs, the contractor is liable for all the repairs that go on that. They were preparing for a seal. They actually put a seal on it just to try and hold it until they actually did the final repair rather than just leaving it open. So that was why there's been a seal put on it. It's not the final product. They're still working on that. So it is a fairly high stress area there. And when they've done some repairs, there's not much base course underneath that pavement. I should have said about Telegraph Road as well. If you go in, there's some sections there, the maximum depth of the existing base course is about 150 mils. When it probably should be about 400 or 500 mils. But that's just what we're built on and what's there. So that's what we're working with.
Yeah, thank you. And they're both heavy traffic areas, obviously, right outside the quarry. But just the quality at the moment isn't, I don't think, what our community would expect. So thanks for that clarification. I don't know who was next. Sorry, so Mark, Deborah, and Murray.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. I I expect the Wards Road, the roadside re-grassing, re-landscaping part of the project's yet to be finished.
That Walker's Road.
Yeah, Walker's Road, rather.
Yep, that's still happening. Yeah. We don't normally do much with rural roads, but they are going to go back and till that up when it gets a bit damper. But we don't normally do that on rural roads because vegetation re-establishes quite quickly. So.
Yeah, I support your comments earlier about doing repairs rather than patches and coming back to the repairs later. Whichever is in my mind, the most cost-effective long-term is the better outcome. And if it means juggling the budgets with Kelvin's assistance, that we can get the long-term outcome is less money spent for a better result, then that's got to be a better outcome. The other question I have is in 5.1, your corridor management and your audits of temporary traffic management plans, what's not in the list, you say that the comment is the unacceptable and dangerous sites were rectified by the contract at the time of the audit. What percentage of those audited sites had dangerous and unacceptable signage? Therefore, if that's from an audit, do we need to sort of expand the audit? Because some of my observation is some of them do leave something to be done. We have a variable standard of signage for sites, particularly in the rural area. Some of them are much worse than others.
Well, the number in terms of percentage of the sites, there are the numbers that are there, so the audits, and that's the number out of those audits. 46, there's 2 that are dangerous or unacceptable. But there's a lot of work going on out there, and a lot of sites. Just bear in mind, we've got 2 corridor managers and one who is just by his physical restrictions is bound in the office, and we've got one who's on the site. So there's a lot of work for one person to go around doing the audits, and they're actually auditing more of the sites than is recommended under the competence. So about 20% of the sites, and I know she would certainly like to do a lot more and get out there. So that's something that we do have to keep working on, things like that as well. So it is an ongoing thing. We react to road users calling in, councils calling in, other contractors talking about other contractors calling in, that sort of thing. That's ongoing. So they're getting those calls on a daily basis and reacting to those, as well as actually just randomly going to sites as well. So it is an ongoing thing. It's something that we have improved, and it just needs more work as well, and probably more resources in the future. But that's a discussion that I have to have with Murray at some stage. Drop you a minute.
Thank you. 2 questions. With regards to these reseals, do we have a policy that we actually don't undertake them in wet weather? Because often you see the dig outs or whatever happen a couple of days after it's all been done, and our public do notice that. And we're quite often told that the water's got in underneath the seal. So I'm just wondering, do we have some sort of process or policy working with the contractor that actually mitigates against that happening? That's one question.
Well, whether it's reseals or maintenance, and then obviously working around the weather is something that they always have to do. Reseals are done traditionally between October and March each year. At the start and the end of the year, there are issues with temperature. So it's not so much dampness, or you can do it, it's raining, it's a temperature thing. Applying bitumen, you need to have 15 degrees or higher. So that's why when you start doing it in April, May, June, it's not a good idea, as well as being wet as well. So yeah, we're working on that all the time. Sometimes weather conditions change. In terms of repairs, when reseals are done, do pre-reseal repairs and the reseal's done. We don't have too many sites we have to go back down there, and we don't want to either, nor does the contractor as much as us, because they're the ones that are liable for it anyway. So we don't have too many issues. There are often repairs done, and bearing in mind, if you're doing a repair in a dig out that's one section of the pavement, the bit next door is probably going to fail next anyway, because it's all built at the same time, at the same age, got the same traffic on it. It's just that section is just a bit worse than the bit next to it. It's all going to fail at some stage. So sometimes water does get in it. Leeston Road, for example, when we did the right turn base, after the winter, it'd been sitting there for a while. It was actually wetter when they went back to do it again than it was when they first did the work. So yes, we do monitor that all the time, and the contractor does as well, because it's their liability. If they have to go back, they don't get paid twice.
Okay, and my next question is, I'm going to put it in under speed limits. The speed vehicle indicator for Springston, can you give us an update on where that project sits or where it is at the moment, please?
Only what we talked about just recently was that we've got Kinetics doing the investigation on the locations that we want to put it, how we can mitigate the clearance from the overhead power lines, which is the big issue that we have today. So it's just, we haven't got that back from them yet, but they're working on it at the moment. So as soon as I hear anything, I'll certainly pass it on.
Okay, thank you. And on a lighter note, given that your office is probably not too far away from Andrew Boyd, I hear that the new surfacing for roads is actually plastic moulded into the substrate to recycle the plastic. So that's the latest I've heard in the new roading metal.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Just the usual concern, isn't it, around the deteriorating road condition for our unsealed roads, and I think back to previous comments you've made, moving into this time of year, that whether it's going to just exacerbate that and create those issues. So I guess we need to be ready to get some brickbats from our community, and then put our big wool pants on and secure some more money to remediate those. And on that note, you talked about those jobs that need doing. I just wonder, David, whether it would be good to have just a cost analysis of that brought to us so that we can make a timely decision as per previous comments, Mark, as well. And bouquets as well, we've got the chance on the 2 turning bays, they've just been mentioned too, but those on Leeston Road, whilst it took a long time, and we've just talked about why one of them was, we certainly all wore the effects of that. What a fantastic addition they've been to safety, and it really has. And you just notice that every time you go along there in peak traffic now, that those issues that were so prominent are no longer prominent. So well done. I guess the only question really is, I see there's a bit of remedial work being done on the cycleway, Andrew or Mark, whomever. What is the outcome of that if we do a remediation, which is obviously on the contractor because of poor work? Is that then monitored and treated as from that date forward as a new section? How do we, sorry, it's a bit of a specific question, but just to understand how long the warranty is on the warranty, for want of a better term. That doesn't start again. That's something that needs to be fixed during the maintenance period. Just to comment on that one there, and we've had it in a few other sites, right? New footpath in Dalston. So it's in that area. What's happened is, as far as we can tell, there's the subgrade has been drying out and shrinking, which reflects through the base course and then through the seal on the top. So it's not because it hasn't been constructed correctly, because it has been. It's just what's underneath is actually changing and shrinking. So there's a crack course and just reflects through, because we've only got a very shallow depth of base course on a footpath or cycleway, and that's what's happened there. They took the top off, and then there's a crack right through the base course, and you dig that it's in the subgrade as well. So it's actually just reflecting through. So it's not because of the work they've done, but it is on the contractor to fix. And it doesn't start the maintenance period again, but the maintenance period's there, and to get the end of it doesn't mean that's the end of it and not liable anymore under the conditions of the contract. If there's poor workmanship on all materials that results in any failure in the future, they are still liable. As long as the contractor is still around and everyone else is still around, then you can still deal with that. But if it's done well in the first place, you don't have too many issues with it. But we have had some in the past that's gone past that maintenance period, but the contractor is still liable after that.
Just where are we at with the Harbour Bridge? Is that in process?
It's being designed at the moment, so when they've got the design, we'll circulate around. You'll certainly see when we've got it, but it'll be a fairly typical design, similar to the ones we've done in Melton Hills. It'll be a bridge design based on that. So precast abutments, steel beams, and then a concrete deck.
Thank you. Move and seconder do we have for this report? Lyle and Hassan, if not. No further questions. All those in favour say aye. Against, declare it carried. Thank you, the two presenters, and invite Douglas to the front of the room. Property report. It's on page 163. The council receives the property report in public. The mover and seconder for that. Alexander and Hassan. Douglas.
Thank you very much. So first item on the agenda is the Salon Aquatic Centre. I know Councillor Alexander, you had a question. Do you want to perhaps put that question and we can just give a more fulsome answer to it?
Yeah, I highlighted in the comments around the issues with the LVL beams due to the need to restain the timber because of damage being occurred. I questioned how did the damage occur and whose responsibility for remediating that damage.
So it's a good question. We could have put a bit more information. So that the beams were stored outside. They weren't a product that you could actually cover up so well from the weather. Otherwise, there was a concern of sweating and moisture getting into the beam itself. So there was a bit of dust, bird material, that type of thing on the beam. Generally, what we were told is that wouldn't be a problem, but once the beams were in place, they had real difficulty getting them back to the quality that they wanted. And it's reasonably superficial. It's not a structural concern. And it just took a lot longer than I was happy with. And this was also coming from the manufacturers. So there is no cost to council. The only issue is it has dragged out into our accelerated program, which has then tightened that up. So there are issues we've just got to work through. We're obviously not expecting to see no claims on the work for the beams, but we also need to work through any other costs that might somehow apply, but we're not seeing anything of any concern on that basis. But the birdcage scaffolding is now starting to be removed, so that part of the building is now proceeding. Anything else on Aquatic Centre? I know there's a bit more discussed in the next part of the agenda, but anything else in the public reporting?
You had your final comment in red was that Armitage William were going to report back to you last week and you were going to further update us at this meeting.
Yes. Okay. So key issue that we've already been pushing now is change rooms. So there was a bit of a real effort made by contractors, subcontractors the last couple of weeks. We now anticipate getting the change rooms back in the in the area between the two pool areas. We should have those now back with us by the end of May. The balance of the change rooms, just a bit of question mark about the female change, and the new family change will be with us just on early June. So probably about a week behind where we would be expecting, but certainly better than what we were seeing about 10 days ago in terms of the program that's in front of us.
It's interesting, it's an update that's about a month later than an update I had this morning.
What were you told this morning?
I had an update that they would be, except for the female change, potentially available early May.
All right, I'll tell you what, I'll check. Was that with project manager, was it? Okay, well, I'll tell you what, I'll go back and check with who has the real oil and find out what that is. My one was from late last week, to be fair. So
it is an important issue to get as much change space available as soon as possible before the winter sets in. And I know of some patrons who have reduced or stopped coming to the Aquatic Centre because it can be quite cold and the wind can be quite challenging to the temporary outside changing rooms. And any way we can make the internal changing available sooner would be much better, even if there's some temporary arrangement with egress and ingress to them.
Yeah, we all concur with that. Tiara Atea, we had a problem overnight with the site being accessed by individuals who've created a bit of tagging inside the building. None of it is an issue in terms of the building itself, but with real challenge at the moment because the building is not sort of fully enclosed. So contractor is re-looking again at the site. Police have attended, and obviously undertake investigations to see what we can do there to try and eliminate those sort of problems. Again, there'll be a bit of reporting in the next part of the council agenda on a couple of things with Tiara Atea. Balance of that, the program is working as we expect. There'll be some reporting to council on the more operational side of the project at the next meeting. So this is what is in front of you, of course, is mainly about construction side. Salon Sports Centre. So this building really is now. Sorry.
I just wanted to comment on page 165. Just consistent theme we have with Te Aratia around complexity of the design and the flow-on expenses that's going to flow through. It just reiterates when you have unique buildings that you end up having unique expensive issues. And I think we're just seeing this flow through the whole project. I guess we can't change what we've got in front of us now, but in the future when we build projects, I think we should always delete the word iconic because it just seems that there always seems to be an expensive solution required.
Yeah, I think we would use as anchor, which is similar to iconic, but not quite as high as iconic. Look, the point is not lost. I suppose the bit to have faith on is that it will be really, in essence, a key part of the town centre and the district, and the sort of issues, teething issues we're having, hopefully we've forgotten those once we're open and looking at what is a really great town centre area.
And I think we need to remember that at the very... sorry, Grant.
So the thing that concerns me, and a number of people brought it to our attention, it's not the build cost that concerns you, it's the OPEX and what it's going to mean in OPEX of this place, the washing and the maintaining and the maintenance.
So I think the key point just to remember is that that's that point we now have an ability to pull the facade back to wash and clean. So which that came out of our own facilities team really insisting we needed something like that. So those review processes I think have worked extremely well. But yeah, it was looking pretty challenging to clean initially, but no, we've got a way around that.
I think too, we're getting what we asked for because we did want a building that stood out. We did want a building that set a new standard in the town centre. We did ask for something that was architecturally beautiful, and yeah, the way that has been delivered could look quite different. And I get the comments around the ongoing maintenance needs to be there, but we also need to reflect on what we asked at the very beginning of this process. And I think that they actually met the project brief probably pretty well from what we started and wanting for a new Rolleston town centre. Yeah, Douglas, next one after Te Aratia.
Yeah, so Salon Sports Centre, we're really now got some staff working in there. The building is all but there. We're just going to work out how we have ourselves on board to have a wee bit of an early look at it. But I've got to say I'm hugely impressed by how the building is looking and it's finishing. So yeah, we're not too far there, and there's a certain amount of excitement about this facility for what it will offer the community, as you can appreciate now that we're seeing it on the ground.
Yeah, just the comments around the doors and the wind lobby and working in together with the heating and ventilation. Again, it comes back to, it's clearly an omission in the design, and that where council and contractor have not overseen that doors opening into a norwesterly or a northeasterly could prove an issue for those systems. How easy is it going to be to engineer a solution for this, and the cost lies between the both of us?
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason we're having a look at it is to see how easy it would be to make a slightly better arrangement. Most cases, most days, probably won't be a problem. Just as we'll know, when there is a wind, there will be challenges. So we just got to determine technically how we can do it. In terms of cost share, I'm not going to comment on that because I can't really answer as to how that would sit at this present time. But we've been looking at a number of design issues and making sure we've been as informed as we should be, and we're actually pretty happy with how that process has gone. Had changes occurred with the builder on this one here, though. That's definitely one that a bit more time looking at it might have been helpful. But at this stage we just need to see what we could do to achieve what we think will be a solution.
I'm just going to note we're 5 minutes away from reaching our 2-hour mark, so if we can speed through this report in the next 5 minutes and cover off the items that people have, otherwise we'll extend the meeting.
I'll move for the extension of time to the end of this report.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. Is there a seconder for that, just in case we need it? Lyle, all those in favour say aye. Against, declare it carried. We'll still try and keep it to 5 minutes if we can. There's still a number of items on our agenda to come, but I'll see how we go.
Okay, well, I'll do my bit. Nothing to add on camping.
Hey, It just notes Rose Park campground, Douglas, and says this is the last time it will be reported. There's a divergence of opinion between the local residents and the council really on how this is to be delivered. Their view is they've done everything they were required to do to get camping reinstated on there and are waiting to see it occur. And as yet, that doesn't seem to be available. One of the things that they're seeing locally is with the the provision of the campervan waste station. I don't think it's even operational yet, but people are sticking stuff down already, so I'm not sure if it's going to work there or not. But and that leads on to that if you're dumping your waste there, you often want to camp there because you park the night. The secondary issue is the Memorial Arch. There is local concern around the scale of some of the mobile vehicles coming in, like buses, whether they're actually going to hit the arch as they go through. Some of the buses that come there on rugby season park outside because they're not confident of getting through the arch. So I think we need a bit of work done there just to make sure we don't get oversized vehicles trying to come in and then dump sewage in the waste station. So there's a few things going on, but it says it's going to drop off the report. I thought I'd better bring it to your attention to have a bit of work on. They sort of thought there was going to be some sort of mobile app where people would pay and stay. I know we're trying to stay within 5 minutes, but anecdotally, people come there in their camper vans, play around the golf, go to the pub for a few beers, come back and sleep in their camper van and go home. At the moment, they're doing it legally. They'd like to do it legally. Plus, when there's events at the community facility, it's quite common now for weddings, people to hire a camper van to stay the night or want to stay the night after. So just those are sort of some of the things that are front of mind.
So we have adequate ability under council policy with camping to allow people like weddings to stay overnight, and I did witness those 2 camper vans you referred to with the golf club recently, and sort of obviously gave a retrospective approval to that. The challenge is that even when the camping was seen as being happening, there weren't huge numbers. I know there are different dollar values that kick around in the community of what was being made. As I've reported previously, we tried to encourage the golf club to see whether there was some benefit in their community effectively managing, and we paid them a commission, but it wasn't of interest to them. So we personally, as well as staff, think we've got 4 really good sites, as we say in the report, and Motukarara sits there, and we think that really meets our objectives, as well as supporting Wakaya, Ko-Ai Pass, and Glen Tunnel with our paid camping arrangements.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I've just looked to my right and I see Deb's red light's not on, so I'll fill in the gap. There's a couple of things. One is, do you like that? That's about the RCWG fund, and I see it has 2 different aspects to it. That's the Responsible Camping Working Group, and then there's the infrastructure group, and it seems to me that there's 2 lines of funding there, and I was just wondering, we've certainly, and I see what you've put Responsible Camping Working Group, which is the RCWG, and you've established some car park and toilet at Lake Coleridge and installation for a new public toilet Hororata Domain, and that seems to me that would be sort of more the stream of funding for the responsible camping. But what are you doing about the other line of funding? Because that's for tourism infrastructure, and I don't think it necessarily says only for responsible camping. And I can think of quite a few, certainly a few where we could put infrastructure in that would come under that other stream of funding, and that would be perhaps the Salon Heritage Centre. We could help them out. Perhaps the Citizen Soldier Museum at Burnham, we could use infrastructure from that other fund there, if I'm reading it correctly. Mainline Steam, I understand, are wanting to go to Springfield. Perhaps we could use some tourism infrastructure funding there rather than just for toilets at Coleridge and Co. And for instance, we were looking at a walking track up the Summit Road, and there may well be needing parking when we decide where the track will start. We may need parking and perhaps facilities there as well. So are we looking at both streams of funding, or are you just looking and focusing on one? No, but you probably can answer. The other thing I'd like to say, I didn't pipe up at the 5 minutes ago, it's about the Te Aratia Centre, and I'm carrying on from what Sam said. to set the standard for the new town centre, it was felt that we really did need to put up a high quality building, and you get what you pay for. And I reflected back, with some amusement, at the iconic building that we had in the centre of Lincoln, and it was so iconic, the takeaway bar, and that was put up as one of the original buildings as well, and people were screaming blue murder about it. In fact, we had to actually pull it down. So you do need, I think, when you're talking about the centre of the town, an iconic building, and I think that we have done the right thing there. And it may cost us a bit more, but in the long run, people will be a lot happier with it. So that's just a comment that I'd like to make. But Douglas, do we use both streams of funding, or have I read that incorrectly?
Yes, sir. So responsible camping funding is more about supporting the freedom camping areas. So that gives you money for cleaning out septics, holding tanks for waste, sewage waste, and refuse collection, and a bit of money for camper, so supporting the camper ambassador type role. So we've actually been very successful in that. Infrastructure fund, and I think, I stand to be correct, but I think both funds were actually in there last year. The Tourism Infrastructure Fund is about specific projects. The ones you're referring to, we'd obviously, I will see whether there's any more rounds. If I think it's ended, there might be, for two of those three groups, really better if they would lead the charge on that. And maybe that's where we go to them. But we've been incredibly successful with getting these toilets in particular in our key.
Absolutely no criticism for what you've done, but I was just thinking if there were two streams, use both of them.
Well, they do come from different government pockets, and we have to use them in that way because we have to sign off appropriate things. So, but let me just check on, I'm pretty sure they're both ended, but I'll check on that, and if there's any angle, I will report back to you so you can give some feedback to those three groups.
Thank you. Leeston Library.
We're now waiting for the long-term plan process to proceed.
Orada Community Centre.
Similar.
Earthquake-prone buildings.
So we're just reporting on those couple of buildings we've been having a look at. So we're actually delighted the Sheffield Domain building came up so well.
West Melton Community Park.
Yeah, just really a current position in terms of what we're looking at there, in terms of we've been working with the community on the design there.
Right, Reed's Pit.
If you've driven past recently, you'll see quite a bit of work going on there. Just the one piece of work, and we're in discussions with transportation about just what area we might need for what are needs for the cycleway / create the pit, but also future long term for the intersection there.
Prickleton Domain.
On the Reeds Pit.
Sorry, Mark.
We were hoping to get some access this summer. Seems to not, time has passed. Are we hoping that next spring the public access will be available, and then we'll have some sort of celebratory event to acknowledge its availability to the public, despite perhaps not having resolved final cycling access to it?
Yeah, the preferred option is to get that, what we think is the best solution for cycle pedestrian access to the pit. But once we're completed, there is no reason why we can't let the public and community use it. It's just that it won't be the preferred option in terms of access for all. You'll come off Whedon's Road will be the best options where the car park is. So yeah, but it's coming together well. Oh, might be a bit earlier than that, but yeah.
Prickleton Domain Pump Track. Prickleton intersection upgrades. Gravel Reserve relicensing. Upgrading council vehicle fleet. Annual RPI, or RP2, L3. Playground inspection is just required. Brings us to the end of the report.
I just had one other item while Douglas is here. It's a property one that occurred last week with a large advertising trailer being placed across the other side of Kidman Street without authorisation. Does that indicate possibly a need to revisit our policies on advertising on council land? Because while that could be a very popular and potentially a very income generating site for advertising for businesses, is there a need to review our policies? I had some sympathy for the company that was advertising employment on it. We do want employment in the district, but it was more that it was unauthorised and they weren't making any contribution to ourselves for using that very prominent site.
I think we all had some sympathy for what they were trying to do there, but ultimately, you know, we don't allow that sort of casual. Look, it is an interesting comment. Will it provide some sort of income stream for us? I suppose simplistically, I'd say, well, we're reasonably minor, and I don't really think it's worth putting much effort into this time. It was useful having the compliance team take over the removal of it, because it wasn't just really about that site, it was about where that board may end up on other sites. So, yeah, at this stage, we wouldn't be advocating doing any work on that, just as it's not a priority. Could I just, while I'm talking, the playground result at 93%, I think, is an extraordinary result, and you might say, well, you should get 100. Well, actually, probably really hard to get 100. But that is a brilliant result, and I just want to acknowledge not only just the effort of council staff, we've got a number of competent staff with this training, but SciCon too, who I think the words of the auditor were, if she could bottle up the SciCon team's passion for playground safety and spread it around New Zealand, that would be awesome. So they've got themselves a really good spot there. One thing we've done really well here too is our SciCon and council staff all go together. We actually brought the trainer in from Auckland about 2 weeks ago, and everyone trains together, which includes also some Timaru SciCon staff too. So we create as a real team event for both organisations. End of my report. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you. Douglas, exactly what you were talking about. This playground issue has been really difficult for our communities to accept. There's been a lot of really well-loved playground stuff taken out, and they've had difficulty understanding the why, the when, and the safety requirements. There's a lot of history been there about some places that have been taken away, and that people said, well, no one's ever hurt themselves on that, but that's beside the point. That staff battled on in trying conditions. I guess the feedback from the community is we've become quite bland. It's all very uniform, and it's a function of what we've had to put in to meet the compliance standards. I guess if there was any challenge, I know some of the newer stuff is pretty exciting, but if there was a challenge from where to from here, just to add some more excitement into our playgrounds and a wee bit of risk, which is difficult to do given the current planning, but a difficult task done well.
I was just going to comment quickly on playgrounds as well, because you know my kids love them. Regarding common of risk, yes, there probably could be more risky play available, but to be honest, based on my children, I don't know how widespread it is, but they will find a way to make it risky regardless. And there are a lot of parents who actively stop their kids from being risky, so it's that's a really hard ball to play. I just wanted to say though, thank you very much for the consideration of electric vehicles and hybrids and stuff like that. It's something we really need to get more of and get on board with, that sort of thing. But obviously it needs to fit in with vehicle renewals and infrastructure that's required around them. So thank you.
That's cool. We've made some good progress in the last 2 days actually, so there'll be a bit more to report on. It's really just a matter of making sure the infrastructure, it's a bit more to it with home stuff, but we'll talk about that. Just the playground one, look, I totally agree that probably we have got a really great result here, but we've just got to keep challenging ourselves. We're really, I mean, this is slightly flippant, but we really appreciated the kids who climbed up on the shade sails at Foster recently, and got a bit of support. But yeah, we all understand that. But the key thing is things like soft fall and choke hazards. We've really got to make sure that those things are not there. Soft fall is absolutely bang on what it should be legally, because it's all about head protection at the end of the day and jarring injuries. So, but yeah, it's good. We're getting some great stuff coming through from developers at the moment, and a few of these extra pump tracks and that type of stuff's really going to be good. So, yeah.
Thank you. Mover and seconded to move. We've moved and seconded this report. All those in favour say aye. Against, declare it carried. Mover and seconded to move into publicly excluded. Alexander and Reid. All those in favour say aye. Against, declare it carried. And we'll adjourn the meeting till 3:30. Start again.